Welcome to Biocanic's Health Intelligence Exchange community, where leading practitioners in integrative health approaches will discuss how they solve the most challenging and common health issues. These regular Q&A discussions are designed to take a deep dive into case studies and integrative approaches in order to elevate the collective knowledge of both experienced and new practitioners alike. Biocanic's Health Intelligence Exchange, your community for functional medicine.
All right. Welcome to the Health Intelligence Exchange, everyone. I'm Jeremy Malecha. I'm the CEO of Biocanic, and today I'm joined by Dr. Carrie Jones. Today we'll be discussing how she's broken barriers in the hormonal health space and her 20-plus year journey to becoming a thought leader in the functional health area. She's one of our speakers for our upcoming virtual Health Intelligence Exchange event on March 7th and 8th. So this is your chance to reconnect with some of our amazing speakers from our October in-person conference, including my favorite speaker, Jen Malecha, to learn how to launch, scale, and expand your health business. You can find all the details and RSVP for your tickets in the comments below. Plus, tickets include free access to the recordings where you can see Dr. Carrie's original presentation, which was definitely one of our top-rated talks. Dr. Carrie Jones is a renowned naturopathic physician known as the Queen of Hormones with over 20 years of experience in women's health and endocrinology. She completed her residency at the National University of Natural Medicine and holds a master's in public health from Grand Canyon University. Dr. Jones is board certified by the American Board of Naturopathic Endocrinology and is a Menopause Society Certified Practitioner, and she has served as the medical director for Precision Analytical, creators of the Dutch hormone test, and is currently, are you still the chief medical officer of NuEthix?
I am, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I wasn't sure.
Correct.
And then Dr. Jones is an international speaker, consultant, and educator for co-hosting the popular Root Cause Medicine podcast and contributing to various educational platforms. Her expertise spans hormones, adrenal, and thyroid health with a focus on empowering individuals to understand and manage their hormone balance through accessible education and lifestyle changes. Thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It was really fun to watch the opener because, you and I were talking ahead of time about community and what an amazing community you've built. And the people you showed, Naisha, Brendan, John, Amatma, I was like, oh my gosh, they're all my friends. I love them. I love this community.
Yeah, I know. It's really great to bring everybody together. Especially in the thought sharing, right? Nobody, you may go through, a cycle issue, fertility issues, and then menopausal issues, and not everybody's going to be the right fit for where you're at as individual health journey.
Right.
And so it's really great to bring everybody's particular approaches and how they target and market to their clients and end users. So for the people that are just kind of checking in, haven't had a chance to see the recordings, and didn't get to really engage with you at our San Diego conference, can you give us a short overview of kind of where you started from and how you ended up specializing in hormones?
Absolutely. I graduated from medical school 20 years ago. So I have been, for 2 decades, I've been a doctor. And the whole time I've pretty much been immersed in women's health and hormones. And I had a brick and mortar practice. This was long before online was even an option. But I had a brick and mortar practice, and somewhere along that journey, I met with Mark Newman, who was the owner of the Dutch test, and he had just created it. And I said, gosh, it looks like you need some help. And he was like, I need a lot of help. We're a startup. So through those years, I became the medical director of the Dutch test, and then moved, after about almost a decade, moved on to Rupa Health as their head of medical education. And now working with a different supplement company, NuEthix Formulations, but also doing a lot of education and a lot of contracting. So I have had my fingers in our industry this whole time, but also in lots of different areas. So supplement company and lab company and just contracting at large, education, large stages, small stages, hosting a podcast. And so my talk was a lot of taking Nike's, tagline of just do it and having people who were there listening, like, just do it. Like it sounds harder than it is. It's not. And anyone can do it, but you have to do it. And afterwards, what was so fun was I got to talk to so many of the attendees who were like, yeah, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing the thing. And I needed that kick in the pants to get going because I thought it was super hard. I thought it would be, a million hoops to jump through. I didn't realize that it could be possible to either work for a company or contract with a company, or how I got on stages, or starting a podcast, or even just creating an ebook. I had people who were like, I haven't created an ebook yet. I need to. I was like, oh, you should talk to Jen. But just to get that oomph behind, that fire behind people, and let them know there's so many options in our field if you don't want to just see clients or patients all day long, and go out there and do it.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the reasons, and it was obviously not your standard presentation talking about hormonal pathways and all the it was the reason why I wanted your particular experience is not, people are passionate about the space. They start as a practitioner and then they may evolve into different career paths, whether that, not everybody is intended to be a solo practitioner with a thriving online business. Maybe they want to work for a company. Maybe they want to do different things, or they want to evolve over time. So maybe kind of walk through the journey of, how you kind of have evolved from that practitioner through to Dutch, and then, why make the change to something like Rupa?
Absolutely. And what's great is, again, 20 years, I've had 20 years in this space. Well, a little more than 20 years if you count school, but we didn't have a lot of opportunities decades ago. It was become a practitioner or nothing. There weren't a lot of companies hiring. There weren't a lot of companies in this space. We didn't have startups in this space. Not really. The companies that were in existence had been around for a long time already, believe it or not. Being on a medical advisory board, a lot of online things like just didn't exist back then. That's how old I am. And so what's great now is when people say, do you think I could do it? I said, yeah, and I think you could do it in like a fourth of the time. The amount of opportunities out there is just huge. And the amount that you can do with online, with chat GPT, with AI, with like, you absolutely can. So I am a Gemini and I get bored really easily. And so I had worked for Dutch for a very long time, which was amazing. Loved it. Loved the test. Still educate quite a bit about it and with them, which has been fantastic. But I wanted to broaden to a platform. So I moved to Rupa. Rupa represents all labs for all practitioners. And I thought that would be great. I get to now have my hands in multiple labs, like GI testing, and I get to know blood testing and Lyme testing and genetic testing and hormone testing and, just everything you could think of. And so I did that, which was a lot of fun. And in the meantime, because I had broadened from one lab to multiple labs, I also got other speaking opportunities and opportunities to be on medical advisory boards and opportunities to consult with startups. And so from there, as you meet people and expand your community and grow and work with mentors, then you can really see all the potential that's out there and decide where you want to go. And the great thing is, I'm of the opinion there is a lot of opportunity. So if you go a direction and you don't love it, you can pivot. You can be like Ross on Friends and pivot, and it'll work out.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, great Friends reference for those of us that are in our 40s.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I thought was people would really like to hear about is kind of how you built your reputation and reach over time, right? So, when did you get on your first stage? How did you start to build your audience? What are the key things that you've done to kind of create that reputation as such a sought after speaker?
So I am an extroverted person, and I have been, when I was in medical school, we do naturopathic medicine does their residencies, or at least they did their residencies differently than conventional medicine. So the residency I was in was a women's health and hormone residency, and I had about 40 students under me. So as the head resident for this department, I worked with a lot of students. So right from the get-go, I had to be leadership position, educating, creating handouts. Back then we would print them, because, and everybody would have like their binder. And then I moved into practice. And as I said, practice was brick and mortar, and my brick and mortar practice had a beautiful front foyer. So I would host for patients or potential patients. I would do talks on hormones and people would come. And then that brick and mortar, I went to a different brick and mortar that was a integrative clinic. So we had MDs and NDs and nurse practitioners and PAs, which also had a huge waiting room. And we would also host events there as well. When I moved to Dutch, though, it was a whole different being, because it wasn't just talking to clients or patients anymore. Dutch was like, guess what? You now get to educate to all sorts of practitioners how to use the test and everything about hormones. So my first true I would say on stage was at a conference called the American Association of Restorative Medicine, AARM. And it was way, 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 way north in Northwest Washington State on the Canada border in a place called Semiahmoo. And we all made the trek up to the Canadian border. And that's where I presented on hormones. And what's interesting is that I was so sick, I developed strep throat. By the time I had driven up there, because you fly in wherever you were, and then it's so far you had to drive. You couldn't fly into this little place. I was like, my throat hurts. And by the time I got to the hotel, I was like, oh, my throat hurts. And so I developed strep throat, and I had a fever, and I was sweating, but I couldn't miss. I was the speaker. I couldn't miss it. And so people were giving me all sorts of things and doing body work on me to prop me up and to help clear my throat so that I could speak on stage. So I remember speaking about hormones, and I was just praying, please don't sweat down the front, just sweat down the back. And I sweat the whole presentation. And I say this because I think a lot of people who want to get into speaking, but they're so nervous, they want it to be 100% perfect. They record and delete, record and delete, record and delete, or they don't even put their foot out there. They don't apply to speak because they're so nervous about it. Maybe they'll fail. Maybe something will happen. Maybe it won't be their best time. But that was my first experience really, truly speaking on stages in front of colleagues. And I had strep throat and a fever, and I was sweating profusely down my back, and I had to get up and do it anyway. So if I can do it with strep and sweating profusely, you can absolutely do it as well. So that's where I got into speaking. And honestly, because I'm so extroverted, and because the Dutch test was a startup at the time, 12 years ago, the owner said, you have to say yes to everything. So I said yes to everything. So any podcast that came my way, any speaking opportunity to practitioners, any conference that came my way or we applied for, I went and spoke. And it helped immensely because I didn't have a choice. I just kept saying yes. And I got to refine over time. But I also developed an amazing reputation of, well, let's ask Carrie. Carrie will do it. Carrie has this experience. And I would watch people on stage and things I didn't like about how they spoke. I would work on that with myself. Things I did like, I would emulate. And it just grew and grew and grew and grew over time. And the same applies for social media. I got into Instagram a long time ago and realized that to build my brand as part of my brand, social media needed to be a part of that. And just started posting consistently for education, but also for numbers, for following, for brand recognition. And again, I had no idea what I was doing when Instagram came out. There were no classes, courses, experts ahead of me. I had amazing, famous key opinion leaders that we all know who would message me on the back end, and they would say, how did you get your word to do that? How did you get that to highlight? How did you get that? How'd you get that space back before Instagram would let you add spaces in the content part? And so I was like screenshotting and notes and all sorts of stuff and just sending it off to these amazing KOLs who were also learning Instagram at the same time. And now, of course, for somebody who's nervous or new or hasn't grown their Instagram, like you can bypass all that. You will go far fast because the learning curve has been done. There's so much opportunity for you. But that's what I started doing is I just was an extrovert. And even I tell my introverts, just you have to do it anyway. Like I know you're introverted. I know you're nervous. I tell my perfectionists, done is better than perfect. And just because it's not perfect to you doesn't mean it's not perfect to everybody else. You may stumble on something. You may realize you have a spelling error in your slide. You may not have liked the way you just said something, and nobody will notice because nobody knows. Nobody knows in the audience what you're about to say or were going to say or thought you were going to say. You may have forgotten something. Nobody knows. And so by just getting your reps in, whether on social media, podcast stages, what have you, it will grow. It will continue to grow. Yeah.
And I think that's such a key point, and it kind of comes back to your three-word motto of just do it. It's all about the reps, right? You know, first time you do it's going to be terrible, but live and learn. Just kind of digging back in, you said when you were kind of improving your speaking skills, maybe just walk us through, because you briefly touched on were you recording yourself and watching yourself back, or how are you actually integrating that in?
You would think that I would. I absolutely hate to do that. I hate to watch myself back, but it is an important part. what I would do is, because I, like everybody, attending all these conferences or watching webinars or listening to podcasts, I would split my brain. Part of the brain was listening for education, and then the other part was, what do I like and what do I not like as them as a speaker. Everything from their background, the type of microphone they have, if it was online, the clothes they wore, did the clothes they wore work for the stage? Did they allow for good movement? Shoes. And as a woman, if anyone, maybe this is a good opportunity for you, Jeremy, we may have talked about this before. Women need better microphones. Like, we don't always have pockets, and sometimes our shirts are flimsy, and so there's like they're like taping the microphone to a silky shirt, trying to hold it in. So everything from like remembering to have something with pockets, or a belt, or being able to clip the microphone in somewhere on my shirt that is stiff enough to hold it, or a sweater or a dress. So these things I would just get repetition and watch over and over. I like somebody's pacing, somebody was boring, somebody was too technical. Technical is a big one. Sometimes, they're so in their head and they understand what they're saying, but when they translate it out to the audience, it doesn't translate. I realized in practice when I saw patients that analogies worked amazingly well. So I became known for analogies. I explain a lot of things in analogies, because if you don't understand it, then I've failed, and I need you to understand it really well. So I would watch speakers who were so up in their head. I'm like, it's not working. People aren't grasping it. So that's how I would just get the reps in when it came to speaking. Just practice, 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 and then elicit feedback from people, or listen to feedback. If somebody said, a lot of people were like, we like your pacing, we like how fast you talk. My ADHD brain can handle that. And others were like, you talk way too fast. So then when it became to you talk, I knew it was going to be a fast talk, maybe at a short amount of time. I would tell people I'm putting a lot on the slides. I'm stuffing the slides so you can use it as a resource. And then I became known for that. We love Carrie's slides because she gives so much information. So if they ever go back and look at my slides, it's not just one word and they had to guess what I was trying to say. It was like, oh, this is what Carrie meant. We can use this as a resource. And for people who speak internationally, American English is not the same as Australian English, or British English or Irish English. Like, words get mixed in translation, accents are different. There's an O in front of estrogen everywhere else but here. And so I was like, I'm putting a lot of information on the slides because I understand my English and your English is not the same. So it was just some of these things I picked up over and over. Even being in other countries, because I lectured internationally a lot, other countries have certain phrases that they use. And so I would have to quick learn. I chose to quickly learn some of these phrases to integrate, or I would learn what their laws were around hormone therapy, or certain supplements might be banned in their country, or certain supplements might have to have a prescription in their country. And so I would make sure to know that. So when I was talking, it wasn't just an American from American point of view. So for people listening, this is important. Like, if your goal is truly to go global, then you want to like keep these things in the back of your mind.
Just touching on one thing you said, what are your one or two favorite analogies?
My absolute most favorite analogy, which of course is now what I'm known for, is the bathtub analogy with estrogen detoxification. So I talk about how estrogen goes through a 2, if not 3-step process for getting out of the body, because we can't keep estrogen forever. And so it's always a clawfoot bathtub, because I'm extra. I want a fancy clawfoot bathtub. So the water coming in is either your 2 or your 4 or your 16 estrogen, hydroxyestrogen. And I can't turn your water off, but I can adjust the water. The drain is going through phase 2 detoxification. Is your drain open? Is your drain closed? Is your drain kind of open but needs to open more? And then the sewer line that's connected to your bathtub is literally the sewer line in your body. Your bile, intestines and out, or your kidneys to your bladder and out. And so when we start talking in those areas, I found over the many years, people were like, oh, this makes so much more sense. Start with the sewer line, start with your kidneys, start with your intestines, start with your bile, then move up to the liver, which is your drain, and then move up to the water, the 2, 4, and 16. And that's probably the analogy that I'm known best for.
Yeah. That's I use that all the time, because my particular health journey, and it sticks with me, and I say it all the time, even with people that don't really understand it.
Yeah.
Kind of thinking about your kind of career today, right? You're doing a lot of things in different ways. So, thinking about a traditional, our general practitioners that we work with is clients all day, every day, going through everything. What does your day look like? How do you balance that and also kind of maintain good work-life balance as well?
Work-life balance. Jeremy, what is that? It's thankfully, I love what I do. And my husband also owns his own business. And so it's more like work-life integration, I would say, as opposed to like, oh, we work 9 to 5 and then at 5 o'clock we shut it off. There are a lot of nights I work, but then there's a lot of mornings I have free. And so it's wonderful to set my own schedule, which ultimately that sort of freedom works well for me. I also work from home really well. I understand not everybody can work from home very well, but I love it. So my schedule definitely depends on the day, and it depends which company I am contracting for that particular day. So Monday mornings are meetings for certain companies, predominantly the supplement company that I work with, NuEthix. So Monday is a lot of NuEthix. It's a lot of creating video, creating content, check-in meetings. And then the same and then Wednesdays, I have an apprenticeship in the morning that I teach. Tuesday, again, it's like, depends which company I'm contracting for that day. And then I have to block out a lot of time when I'm in slide creation or when I am for a conference I'm going to do or some sort of webinar or training. But then I have my own. So then I usually, Tuesday afternoons, I usually record YouTube video and create content for a blog. Thankfully, I do have a social media manager. And so she does a lot of content creation for social media, but I review, edit, film the video for all of it. And so that's dispersed. And then recording my podcast. So I have guests on. I usually only have a guest a week. Sometimes I'll do more depending on how far booked out we are. But just for space sake, it's easier that way. And then, sometimes I'm on a podcast. So Thursdays and Fridays, I try to leave to podcast days, whether I'm on a podcast or somebody's on my podcast, then I will fit that in there.
Yeah. So kind of a blocking and tackling question, because this always comes up. You said you were doing your Instagram, you're helping people with Instagram, but now you said you've got a social media manager.
I do.
At what point in one's career do you get a social media manager?
Mine was out of, let's say, frustration, bitterness, irritation, where I was done with social media. I'd been on it for so long, and I thought, I am enjoying the mental health aspect of not being on social media, but I recognized how important it is to get this education out, because the education in women's health and hormones, just of course, forever has not been out there. So I thought, I'm going to see if I can hire somebody who can understand my voice, my vibe, what's going on, to manage this for me. We have a content calendar that my actual business manager, my social media manager, my business manager, and we data dump all our content into there. And, but I just hired her in December. So I've been doing this a long time on my own. People ask me all the time, like, oh, who manages this for you? I'm like, me, myself, and I. That's who does it. I waited way too long. I fully admit it. I tell people, if like to get your time back, the minute you can do, outsource, unless social media is the one thing that you absolutely love, it lights you up, brings you freedom. Consider hiring somebody. Now, you still have your hand in all of it. You can't just walk away from social media. It's approving calendars, it's approving content, it's filming content, but the posting, the graphics, I handle the comments, but they set them up. So hire somebody. Don't do what I do and got complete social media burnout when I probably could have avoided that 2 years ago by hiring somebody. Yeah.
And I think that's such a critical crossover point, is when do you go out and hire? And I think it's probably when you start to burn out.
Yes. When you feel bitterness towards whatever social media platforms you're on, when you take a long weekend or a vacation and you're off of it and you don't care, like, that's kind of an indication maybe you should hire somebody to manage it for you on the back end. Yes.
So kind of one of the brands that you've now own is the Queen of Hormones, that through your talking and speaking and development, how do you kind of balance that? Because you also mentioned that, part of going to RUPA was getting a diversity and exposure across other things. So, yes. How does that kind of shape your work today?
It is the reason I actually ended up leaving RUPA as an employee. absolutely 10 out of 10. Love Rupa, loved my time at Rupa, loved the people at Rupa. But after about a year, I realized, hormones is honestly what I wanted to do. I had only ever done hormones my entire career. Obviously, the Dutch test was all hormones all the time. So when I went to Rupa, I got to learn a lot. I got to meet a lot of amazing labs and lab leaders and clinical teams and work with a lot. And by the end of a year, I thought, nope, this is not my zone of genius. This is not where I need to be. You do not need me to be the person fronting Lyme disease testing or genetic testing or, anything, cardiovascular testing, all very, very, very important. But again, pillars of labs that I didn't need to be the front of for Rupa.
Mm-hmm.
And so I chose to leave Rupa and just go back to playing in the sandbox of hormones. And again, we talk a lot. I know like you and Jen talk niching down.
Right.
And I thought I wanted to go broader, and it was a great experience. And I ultimately realized, nope, back to the niche, back to hormones. Now, what was wonderful about Rupa is that they gave me the opportunity to continue to teach only hormones. I teach boot camps with them on hormones. I host the podcast and have guests on about hormones. I've done webinars on hormones for them and other groups associated with Rupa, now full script. And so I still just got to say the funnel was too wide. I needed to go back to hormones. So I tried it and then I pivoted.
Yeah. And we talk quite a bit about the niching down and getting to your right ideal audience. And it's, we were talking about, a lot of functional medicine, you're kind of like all things to everybody.
Yeah.
And you're kind of all over the place and you can't really be an expert at anything. Yeah. And it's a struggle because you're constantly, having to teach and learn something new rather than just focusing on where your passion and expertise lies.
When I had a practice, so I saw patients for, I think, like 13, 14 years. I was a general practitioner, even though hormones was my love. Hormones is what I did my residency in. Hormones is what I was board certified in, because there were, at the time, so few general naturopathic practitioners who could also do hormones that I would have people come in and they would be there for hormones, but at the same time they'd have the flu, or at the same time their throat hurt, or at the same time they had hurt themselves. So I did a lot of acute care overlapped with like hormonal stuff. So for years I got really good at being diverse, but ultimately at the end of the day, what I loved was the hormonal aspect. And that's ultimately what people saw me for. But because I was, I'm very talkative and extroverted and outgoing and understanding, that people were like, okay, I need my hormone results. But at the same time, can you look at this skin tag? Or at the same time, I'm also having this weird symptom, or at the same time, like my heart's being weird. Can we get that evaluated? And so I did a lot of at the same time care, acute care for people. And thankfully I was in acute care clinic. So I had a wealth of help behind me. But even in clinic, like hormones is what I wanted to do, but I did have a long clinical experience of being very general.
Mm-hmm. And kind of thinking back across the 20 years of hormone testing, right? So we go from like serum testing to now having the Dutch test and then cycle mapping. And now we're seeing kind of the emergence of all of these different kind of niche applications.
Oh yeah.
Right? So you have your fertility programs, you have your menopausal programs. Like, where do you see this going? And what are kind of some of the new exciting things that you mentioned, like when you started out, you didn't have the same vendors and all the new stuff. So what's kind of new and on your radar that really kind of excites you about where the industry's going? One
of the things, the wearables, I think, are getting smarter. I don't know that they're getting necessarily as accurate as we want, but we have time. They're getting there. Mm-hmm. But one of my favorite things now is because some companies do offer, you can check your hormones throughout the month. Mm-hmm. And before, you can still do it now. You would collect. So we're at the very end of February. So let's say you wanted to check your cycle the entire month of February. You wanted to graph it out. So you would collect almost every day. Then you would mail it off to the lab. And then in March, they would, process it and give you the results and say, hey, in the month of February, here's what you were at. Well, now technology is so freaking cool that we can literally pee on a stick and either scan our phone or insert it into a device and get results within, 20 minutes. that tells us our hormones. Now, it's not every hormone. It's not every metabolite. Like, it's not all encompassing comprehensive quite yet, but it is really neat. And I've tried out some of these devices that are geared towards fertility, where you pay on the stick and get daily information about your cycle. But now these companies recognize the importance of just general hormones, not fertility, and even into perimenopause, what's going on with somebody's perimenopause. Eventually, I would love. I used to say I want a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, that also tracks cortisol. Mm-hmm. And we're not there yet. But I would love, why not? I would love a CGM that could track everything. That would be fantastic. Because we know hormones in women are pulsed out. And by hormones, I mean generally like in the estrogen family and progesterone, even though I know we have a lot of hormones. They're pulsed out at various points in the day. So unlike you, who likely has your testosterone pulse in the morning, and then it's sort of, baseline the rest of the day, my progesterone pulse may not happen in the morning. It might happen at 3 p.m. I don't know. And so to get that information on demand with we'll call it a CHM, continuous hormone monitor, would be fantastic. Because what happens is women go to the doctor, they get their blood drawn, as an example, and they're like, oh, my progesterone's low. I'm like, maybe, but it was one blood draw and 1 day of your cycle. And I don't know, like, we have to take the pulses into account. You don't just turn on the hose of progesterone and produce progesterone all day or estrogen all day. It's pulsed depending on when the hypothalamus tells the pituitary to tell the ovary to make the pulse or to make the hormone. And so just having that like even nuance could be helpful depending on what you're looking for. So I think that is probably coming in the next 5 years, at least cortisol. I'll be curious on the other hormones.
Mm-hmm. I mean, clearly we and most of the audience kind of live in Dutch testing, mirror testing, temp drop cycle tracking, and all that stuff. What do you think is the biggest barrier for why most women outside of our industry aren't aware of the importance of things like that? What does daily progesterone pulsing look like, and why? And what do you think that follow-on impact is to their overall health?
I think honestly, because it's not prolifically taught at all in conventional medicine, that is not then translated to everyday care. So for example, a couple years ago, my doctor was too busy to see me, and I went and saw her physician's assistant who was really nice. And he said, tell me again what you do. I said, I'm a naturopathic doctor in hormones. And he goes, oh, I don't do hormones. And I was like, okay, what do you mean by that? And he's like, no, hormones are way too complicated. I just send them off to the endocrinologist. That's not my field. Which, okay, fair. He knows his limits, sets his boundaries, and refers on. But at the same time, imagine somebody coming to him not knowing this. Let's say a woman comes and says, my PMS is terrible. I don't feel well. And here is a practitioner who says, I'm too scared of hormones. It's overwhelming. They're confusing. So I'm either going to refer you on, cross fingers, or he's going to go, well, just go on the birth control pill. Like, I don't know what to do with you. Hormones are scary. Go ahead and go on the pill instead, and that'll manage everything. So it becomes this disconnect on she's trying to understand what's going on with her. We weren't taught any of this stuff at a young age about how our body really works. And then practitioners aren't given a whole lot of time. I've talked to a lot of OBGYNs in my career, a lot of OBGYNs who say, I can deliver a baby, no problem. That's what I'm born to do. I can prescribe birth control pills. But when we get into any of the nuances on hormones or like that finer detail, they're like, I wasn't really taught that, especially as I'm talking them through from a functional medicine perspective. They're like, hey, look, I get it's our biochemistry, but like, I didn't even know that much. And once you get outside of, let's say, OBGYN, I mean, it's really not taught. I have a gastroenterology friend who, when she made the transition to functional medicine, said to me in our consult one day, can you just run through the menstrual cycle for me? And I was like, hold on, you are a gastroenterologist. She was also board certified in internal medicine. And I said, you have 2 board certifications. You have children. You don't know how the menstrual cycle works? And she's like, Carrie, it's not my whole. Like, no, just run me through it. Now she's gone deep into it. She's phenomenal at it now. But I thought, yeah, you know what? Why would the average everyday consumer woman know? Because we weren't taught in school. And then our practitioners like, we don't know, go on the pill.
Yeah. Well, especially when you start talking about like teenage acne and starting people super early for treating
Pill,
of a skin condition.
pill. Keep on the pill. There's no other option, and they don't believe in any other option. They definitely don't recognize or are taught diet and lifestyle. They're surely not going to recommend any kind of herbs or nutrients. I mean, that's vitamin D is sometimes a little like, that's dicey to recommend vitamin D, especially if you are in a hospital system that just doesn't believe in that at all. Then they're not going to get that information, and that's really sad.
Yeah. So shifting gears just a little bit. So kind of coming back to being at our Hicks Encore event next weekend, or a week from this weekend. How was it? When I asked you to present for us, I asked you to do something very non-traditional. How was it presenting your kind of career journey?
It was a lot of fun. It was actually way harder, 10x harder than I anticipated, because I'm so used to creating biology type slides, biochemistry type slides, hormone slides. And you said, I want you to create slides about your journey, and then also be motivational for people who are also looking for other opportunities and how you got there. And I had never really been asked that before. I'd never been interviewed on that before. And I thought, how do I do this? How do I tell a story, keep it interesting, but also it like really motivate people that I'm not special. Like I said, and the reason, just for everyone who's listening, I'm in the Portland, Oregon area, which is where Nike is based. And at the time when I had a clinic, I saw a lot of Nike employees. So Just Do It was sort of like, it's all over our city. And so I was like, yeah, just do it. Just press go, say yes, apply to speak, create the ebook, just do it. And so it was really ended up being a lot of fun to think through my career. And then how do I overlay that to the people in the crowd who are hesitant or nervous or curious or scared, who are perfectionists, introverted, and like, how do we get it out there that, one, we need your help. We like, I need you out there. And two, like, they need you out there. The world needs you.
Yeah. I always love asking this question to people. So thinking back, now that you've fully cataloged your journey, what was the biggest misstep or kind of oops that you kind of came back from that you wish you would have done a little bit differently?
Oh my gosh. The biggest misstep that I wish I would have done differently. Interestingly, this just came to me. It didn't even come to me at Hicks.
Right.
But when I was still in full-time practice, I was working. So what had happened was Mark Newman, who owns Dutch Test, had come to the clinic I was at, presented. I knew who Mark was. Mark had a long history at a different lab company, so I was very familiar with his work. Emailed him after the fact and said, you look like you could use some help. He said, yes, but I'm a startup. I can't pay you except in urine tests. So I worked for Mark for free as a consultant, essentially for like a year and a half, 2 years. And he kept saying to me, we're going to have enough money to hire soon. Like, we'd like it to be you. How would that work? And at the time I was like, oh, I love patient care. I love patient care. I love patient care. I love patient care. Looking back on it, I did love patient care. I love my patients and I love the care. I didn't love insurance and prior authorizations and all the things, because I fully took insurance at the time. And it wasn't so much an oops, but I wish I had the gumption to write Mark and say, you look like you need some help. I want to learn labs. So I was proud of me for that. But then I couldn't quite get off the cliff of like the next step. I was like, I don't want to give up patient care, because this is all I've known. This is all I've known for over a decade. And like that, like, change is scary. And so my hand was forced. Essentially, I had gotten married and I was going to move. The clinic was completely changing, unfortunately for the worse. And it's now completely closed. And the universe just stepped in and was like, Pink, get off the cliff. Like, you need to jump. Let's go. And it was the best decision. It ended up being the greatest thing ever. I cried hysterically when it happened. And then it ended up being the greatest thing ever. And that gave me the confidence moving forward of like, just jump off the cliff. It's fine. You'll be fine. It'll work out. And if it doesn't work out, like Rupa, not that Rupa didn't work out. I just had the realization I didn't want to do all the labs. I like hormones. And so even when I said to Rupa, I love you guys as a platform, but I just want to do hormones, like that was scary to tell them. And they were like, no problem, just do hormones. Like, we'll hire you back for hormones. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And so I wish I would have had the gumption to like either cut back on patient care sooner or, jump harder at Dutch initially. There was some bungling there in the beginning, but I learned from that. And I like that every time after, jumping was easier. Advisory boards, webinars, stages, job shifts, consulting opportunities. I would jump sooner, or if it was, the wrong decision, I would say thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, totally get it. I don't think I've ever told you this, but I was accepted at Oregon Health Sciences University to go into medical school.
Yeah, OHSU, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I spent many years studying for MCATs and getting in, and then decided at the last minute that I wanted to do engineering in medical because I could impact more lives rather than one-on-one, but bring different stuff to the world. So that's my story.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you made the right decision.
The letter is actually up there.
Do you have it framed?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Because I was like, well, this is so all the studying, all the MCAT work, all this, all the letters and applications and interviews and everything else. I've got a 1-page letter of acceptance.
My master's degree. So people go, why'd you get your master's in public health? At the time, so my clinic was going through, the clinic I was at, I didn't own, but I was the medical director of, and it was going through a lot of emotional turmoil with the owner at the time. And I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to do international work. I think if this clinic completely implodes, I'm going to leave and do international work. And I looked at all these NGOs, non-governmental organizations across the world, and they all required an MPH, a master's in public health. And I thought, no problem. And at the same time, one of my very best friends, Dr. Debbie Rice, said the same thing. She said, I'm looking at NGOs too, and they require an MPH. I'm going to get mine. So we got ours together at the same school. And about a year into it, of the 2-year program, I looked around and I went, I don't think I'm ever going to use this, like ever. But I'd already spent the money. I paid for it as I took the classes. So I was at that pivot point of, do I keep going? Do I finish out the next year? Because I'm already half in debt or half paid. Or do I just stop completely? And I ended up because I'm type A, firstborn daughter, all the things. So I'm like, well, I'm not quitting. I'm going to keep going, I guess. Got my master's in public health, and I've never, not ever used it. But what's interesting, because I'm a naturopathic doctor and not a medical doctor or not a DO, the MPH inadvertently on a business card seems to give me a lot of credibility in conventional world. So I've had a lot of people who maybe would not have given me a second look because I'm a naturopathic doctor or they didn't know what that was. But I have had a lot of people go, oh, but you have an MPH. Like, yeah, come on, let's talk.
Yeah.
I'm like, sweet. So sometimes people go, what does the MPH stand for? And I'm like, well, it's because it was transparent. It's $24,000 for my MPH. It says $24,000 fancy letters on my business card to take me more seriously in some settings. So, it's a lot of money.
Yeah. About $8,000 a letter.
Yeah. That's definitely, and funny enough, for those who do know Dr. Rice, because I think some of your audience knows Dr. Rice,
yes.
Sort of feels the same way. We're both like, we probably shouldn't have done that. But people will say the same thing to her. Oh, you have an MPH. She's like, but I'm also a doctor. That doesn't matter. You have an MPH. Yeah. So that's been pretty funny.
Yeah. Just one last quick question before we shift to a Q&A. So what are you excited about reconnecting with the group at our Hicks Encore virtual event?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, like I've said this a few times now, the community is fantastic. I absolutely loved coming off stage. We had a break and being able to talk to so many people and being able to talk to so many amazing practitioners. Like I knew a lot of these people out in the world. I knew that they were doing well with their clients and their patients, but they were really afraid to further grow their brand or take the next step or apply to be on a stage or ask to be a guest on a podcast. And so it was really a lot of fun to talk to them and to go, okay, I did the thing. Like I'm going to do the thing, or I scheduled the thing. Like I'm going to be Nike and just do it. And I even got a few text messages from attendees in like the week after of people I knew who said, okay, thanks to you, I did it. Like here's what I did. And I think that's really exciting. And so to be a part of the Encore is just to continue that, like just to really talk about all the opportunity that's out there, all the impact people can have in the world, not only one-to-one, but if you have any other interest in branching out as far as consulting with companies or advisory boards or being on stages or being on podcasts, and how it doesn't take a genius to do it. It's the opportunity is everywhere. You just have to apply or put yourself out there, or network a little bit. And so wonderful part about you and Hicks and just Biocanic in general is like the networking. Like when I think of a top networker, Jeremy, I think of you a lot. And so that's what I'm really excited about for the Encore. So for the people who, if you're listening, you haven't signed up, definitely sign up. Because again, even just the community aspect, but the networking aspect, being in the circle, you are the 5 people you hang out with, and that includes online. So being in the circle is a big deal.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're trying to do is really, if you're a practitioner and you're kind of on an island somewhere, it's great to have a support community. Obviously you and I cross paths at conferences and we have all of our huge networks. But we really want to bring people together and give them that support structure to be successful in whatever way that is. So now let's transition to our audience Q&A. Thank you who have been posting questions in the comments. We'll get to as many as we can. Before we dive in, we are obviously talking about our virtual Hicks Encore event, March 7th and 8th. It's your chance to reconnect with Dr. Carrie Jones and the rest of our amazing speakers. And it's all about business, how to launch, scale, and expand your practice. You can find all the details to RSVP for your ticket in the description and comments. Plus the tickets includes free access to the live recordings from our first event with all of our great speakers. So let's jump to that first question. So Resilience Enlightened from Instagram asked, are there any companies who supply estrogen and progesterone like hers or My Alloy that you would trust?
Well, I mean, hers and My Alloy, I trust. They get them from pharmacies. If you're looking, there's one company that I know of that is doing some topical estrogens and progesterone. Am I allowed to say company names on here?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Names.
I have no affiliation, but Quicksilver does do hormones in their products. And so sometimes people who are like, oh, I'm not ready yet for a prescription hormone, or I just kind of want to try or dabble in it. I want a face cream, but I'm not ready to go the My Alloy route. Quicksilver does have hormones in their product. However, hers and My Alloy do go through pharmacies, so it's very safe, totally up to snuff, and is trustworthy.
Yeah. Next question is, as someone who's worked internationally, how does hormonal care differ globally, and what lessons can we learn from other healthcare systems? So
the UK, the NHS in the UK is a lot more forward thinking than we are in the US around hormones. Their guidelines are further ahead in what they offer, that I've seen most of the time, that I've seen when they offer to women. Now, it may not be a dose you would agree with. It may be a little lower than maybe you agree with. But I was shocked at how the NHS is like, yeah, give menopausal women hormones. It's totally okay. Whereas here in the US, there's a lot of resistance. There's a lot of, no, that causes cancer. We don't do that. However, functional medicine, as Jeremy said, and I agree with, is definitely behind the times throughout the world. There are pockets of it. There are a lot of amazing practitioners throughout the UK or throughout the EU, through Australia, through New Zealand, through Africa that I've met. I'm leaving out the US and Canada because for obvious reasons. So I think that just globally, you will explain something, and a lot of times practitioners, unless they've been really paying attention to American education, practitioners are like, I didn't know that. That's groundbreaking to me. That's new to me. So you will have to pull, if you speak internationally, either ask the organization that you're working with, how into functional medicine are they? Are they newer? Are they more advanced? Do they get access to a lot of American educators, or not? And that will help you gauge what you're talking about. So there are great pockets all over the world of international practitioners who are into it. But I've also run up against who were like, oh, I hadn't heard that before. I didn't know that, when it's common knowledge here in the States, in our functional bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, and I should also mention, sorry, there are certain supplements that, or even medications that just aren't available. And then certain things are different. So if you are going somewhere to speak, then you do want to keep that in mind. For example, melatonin is a classic example. Say you're talking about melatonin. It's prescription only in a lot of countries. And so you may just be casually mentioning melatonin, but you're speaking to a group of practitioners who maybe can't prescribe or don't know how to prescribe it. And so that's sort of overwhelming to them. DHEA is another one if you're talking hormones. And then even certain supplement ingredients. So in England, in particular, they have restrictions on a lot of supplements, unfortunately. So if you are working with a group in other countries, just ask. I always asked, hey, can you get me a list of things that are prescription only that maybe in the US aren't? Can you get me a list of like herbs you're not allowed to use? Like for a while there, and it might still be DIM, diindolylmethane. My friends in England couldn't get it. They used to, like in my original days of speaking in London, everyone's like, yeah, we can get DIM. And then it was like, nope, can't get DIM. That's been banned. I mean, they would source it other ways. And I don't know if DIM is back yet, but like interesting things like that. Yeah. So you just have to pay attention when you lecture.
Yeah. This next question, I think, was a follow-on to companies that you trust. So we have gotten this question. So what's your take on EndoAccess supplements relative to their...
Yeah. So I'll be honest, I've never used EndoAccess supplements, so I have no personal experience, but their supplement formulator, Dr. Liz Bartman, is like 100 times smarter than I am, and I would trust her with my life. So if Liz formulated it and said they're good, like I totally stand behind them because I stand behind Liz.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Next question. What are some common misconceptions about hormonal health that you aim to debunk through your work?
Well, because my hormonal education has changed as I've gotten older. So now that I'm in my 40s, a lot of my hormone education is around women who are in their 40s and up. And there are a lot of miseducational statements that are made out there around hormones in general, or how the body works, or what's allowed or not allowed. People view the guidelines as law, for example. So they'll be like, oh, I can't do that, or I can't prescribe that. It's not in the guidelines. I'm like, but the guidelines isn't law. So it's just a guide. It's just a guideline. And yes, I understand maybe from legal purposes, people try to stay in the guidelines, but it doesn't, again, like if you can justify what you're doing, you know what you're doing, you're keeping up to date on what you're doing, you're testing what you're doing. Just some of those things I think are really important. And women have been largely left out of research initially for a long time. So we have a lot of catching up to do. And I think some of these myths and misunderstandings, we will continue to find out more and get more research on as time goes on. We're kind of in that gray area of like, we know some things, but we don't know a lot of things because we're behind the 8 ball when it comes to research. And some things, in full disclosure to my patients, I will say, like, we don't have research on that. It's anecdotal. I have, I can say I have 20 years of experience using it, and here's what I see. Or let's say I was talking about the herb Shatavari the other day, which is an Ayurvedic herb out of India. And it's been used for thousands of years. Like all my Indian friends are like, oh, of course, Shatavari. It's like, it's whatever. All women use it. We all take it. And that and holy basil. And but you ask somebody about like, oh, well, is there a placebo double-blind study on it? I'm like, no, but the whole country of women seem to like it. So I think that's pretty good to use. So just being upfront in like what we do have, what we don't have, and sort of where we're going.
And the kind of building upon that, what advancements or trends in hormonal care are you most excited about right now?
I am excited about the at-home testing that we mentioned. So I am excited about things like Mira is an example because it puts the ownership of health entirely in her hand. She collects it at home. She gets the information right there on an app and is able to interpret it. And this includes certain like menstrual cycle apps. For example, Wild AI, which is about women athletes or women exercisers and their cycle and overlapping where you are in your cycle and what would be the best, like cycle syncing when it comes to exercise, like just puts all that power right back in your hands. For a long time, we were taught that we had to give our power away. It was like only the birth control pill could fix it, or we'd go to the doctor. Nobody really taught us about our body. And I'm really excited that now all the education, a lot of these apps, a lot of these at-home things are just giving us the power right back. Because I think a lot of people who work in the hormone space realize that if women had learned this information a lot younger, then we would be able to fix our own problems a lot easier versus panicking and like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what this is. It just never explained to us and continue to never be explained to us in the medical office. And that tide is changing. So I am excited for that aspect of women's health.
Yeah. And Mira integration might be coming soon. Wink, wink.
That's so cool. I just actually had a meeting with Mira last week, 2 weeks ago, because I have been playing with it myself for obvious reasons. And I did a Dutch test at the same time I did the Mira and checked in with my symptoms, and it's been a lot of fun. I've also tried UVA, just in full disclosure. Like I don't have a W-2 with any of these companies, but I do like to play in the hormonal lab field for sure.
Yeah. Aminda06 from Instagram asked, first, thank you for all your great content, advice for transition from traditional office practice into my own full-time practice.
Do it. We need you. Yes. And this is probably a great question, even better for Jen and Jeremy, transitioning to your own full-time practice. But the only thing I can tell you is that you were about to be wildly successful. So set up your back end and your SOPs right away. I was just talking to one of my friends the other day, and he said, God, I wish you'd go back into practice. Like, we're just losing so many practitioners, or we just don't have a lot of great practitioners who understand functional medicine and, have the time or, empathetic or anything. And so the more we can keep like I don't know how to pronounce the name, but the more we can keep like you, do it. Definitely do it. And you literally are about to be wildly successful. It is not going to take long. My friends who transition to their own practice, they worry, they panic that they're going to be living under a bridge because they'll make no money. And within like a month, they're like, what was I thinking? I can't keep up. I'm like, the public is desperate. The minute you put it out there at all in social media or, wherever the area that you live, they will come flocking.
Yeah. And last question with time. So Jess asked, I saw podcasts of the guest, Dr. Stacy Sims, and she explained that so much of the research that is done on hormones has been done on men, which influence recommendations and dosing. Can you comment on that at all?
Not only men, but male mice, male rats. So, and when Stacy or anybody's talking about research, it's research at large. So research on cancer, research on heart disease, research on a pharmaceutical, research on, the flu. It's has historically done men, male rats, male mice, male monkeys, because they didn't want the influence of the menstrual cycle. That was too difficult, too challenging. I mean, for a long time, if you could get pregnant, even if you didn't want to, you were excluded completely from research. That changed in the early 90s, but even still, researchers are like, it's still kind of a confounding factor to have a menstrual cycle. So we're going to try to keep women out of there or not take into account where they are in their cycle. Now, when it comes to hormones, though, when it comes to like estrogen and progesterone, like that, they are now using women. However, going back to your original question, that's the problem. And that's what they've realized is that they did all this heart disease research on men and just applied it to women, and oops, not quite the same. And now, thankfully, they're backtracking and doing research on women and heart disease. Now they're doing research in other cancers, colon cancer is an example, not like breast or cervical, on women in particular. They're looking sort of, in some cases, depending where you are in your cycle. Like there are a few studies that are looking to see, glucose insulin in the follicular phase versus the luteal phase, just things that we were largely taken for granted or assumed to be static. It's always the same. Like we know that's not the same anymore. So Dr. Sims is totally correct in that. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great discussion. I want to thank all of you that joined us today. And for those of you that asked questions, if you're watching this as a replay, you can still post your questions. We'll get those questions over to Dr. Carrie. But where can people sign up or follow you and connect with you?
Absolutely. So, social media for one. So I'm on Instagram at dr.carriejones. But everything, absolutely everything is on my website, drcarriejones.com. So you can sign up for my newsletter. You can get all my free ebooks. You can see where I'm teaching, what I'm doing, podcast, all the things, drcarriejones.com. And of course, I'll be at the Hicks Encore. So don't miss that. Come back.
Yeah, we'll see you, I think Friday, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So thank you again. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a live stream. As I mentioned earlier, we're hosting our event next weekend, March 7th and 8th. Make sure that you sign up and RSVP and have a chance to connect with Dr. Carrie virtually.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you.